Well, good afternoon. This is your host, Michael J. Long, and thank you for joining me. I appreciate it. Today's December the 2nd, and what a snowy day it is, at least where I'm at. It's where I live, it's snowing. But anyways, so I was listening to this video on YouTube, and I don't know, keep forgetting the name of the anchor who does this show. Where she had one of the I don't know if he was an ex-CIA agent or former ambassador, or what he was. But anyways, I'll have to watch the video again to see if I can jog my memory up. But they were talking about the protests in Iraq, but I want to offer my view on all that. First of all, Iraq has become a failed state. Ever since the United States intervention to overthrow Saddam Hussein in 2003. And the belief was that they had weapons of mass destruction, or that they were sheltering terrorists, or all this other information, right? All these other stories the U.S. and lies the United States federal government sold as a pretext to try to go in and invade. And I think it was really more about oil. I mean, because they're in anything. So this government that exists in Iraq that was, I guess, propped up by the United States has become a complete failed state. Surprise, surprise, because many of our interventions end up that way. But anyways, I guess their people are protesting now, demanding the resignation of their prime minister, who's already resigned, and now I guess they want to start over and get rid of parliament and all this stuff in Iraq that was propped up by the United States, because what they want to do apparently is to create a new government duly elected by the people of Iraq, and so I think that's where they're getting at. But if you notice, these people are not being backed by the United States, whereas prior uprisings have been. And then you've come to find out most of them ended up being terrorist cells in most of those groups, and they ended up taking over most of what was going on in those uprisings and all that. The so-called, ISIS and other terrorist groups that we were supposedly against. So it just goes to show you that our foreign policy is a complete fraud, in my opinion. It has served no purpose in the Middle East or in that whole region whatsoever, other than to benefit us, Saudi Arabia, and Iran, and in part also Israel. And so, it's just created, our policies towards that whole region has been to create destabilization, and it's disastrous. And I guess the United States is not going to sit by and let these protesters go on and on and on and on. So instead, what they're going to do is use its military, have the propped up military and police of Iraq to be used as a Republican puppet guards unit or whatever, along with the United States military to use lethal force against them, which I think is BS. I think it's time that we stay out of whatever is going on in Iraq and let their people sort out what needs to be sorted out in their government. Let their police and military handle whatever violence occurs, and really just mind our own business. It's something we have not been good at since the end of World War II. Now, I remind you that World War II was justifiable. World War II, the Civil War on the side of the Union, the Revolution, all that. But, what I mean is there's very few wars that in any case, in any shape, matter, or form, have been for the right reasons and for the right purposes or whatever. This Iraq war that occurred was the pretext for what is currently going on in Iraq and possibly other countries in the region. You know, and every time they get someone that is anti-U.S. in terms of, you know, the intervention that we espoused in terms of overthrowing dictatorships and other countries' governments in favor of those we back for either oil or some type of interest that I guess benefits us. But the idea is that we're using force to achieve that, which is actually anti-libertarian and goes against the non-aggression principle. Now, in the case of World War II, we were attacked. Yes, we were. But what led up to that is hardly ever talked about in the history books. I mean, of course, yes, the Japanese would have probably invaded us at some point or attacked us at some point, and we probably would have responded anyways. But they were taking over colonies that had belonged to us, the French, and the British, so the American response was to cut off their oil supply going into Burma, because they were also invading Burma and China. And so this is an interesting case in which the United States decided to cut off their oil supplies. The Japanese got mad at us and attacked us. Now, I'm not saying that World War II was not justifiable, because they probably still would have attacked us at some point, considering between them and the Germans, they wanted to try to overtake the whole world to brand in their image because of the leaders they had elected, and they became dictators over a period of time, I guess. But I think overall, I don't think we should have cut their oil supplies until we actually got attacked. And then we could have at least said, see, but you started it. But you attacked us first and we did nothing, you know, so to speak. Which is kind of a hard argument to make when you acted first. But in any case, you know, we were attacked by the Japanese. We were probably going to be invaded by the Germans. So, you know, overall, for the reasons given, I think World War II was justifiable. That was a war we had every right to be involved in. But there's not too many wars that start out that way. Most of our wars have been based on, you know, I mean, I'll give you an example. Overthrowing the, you know, Native American Indians and then putting them on reservations was not a good start to our own history. Instead of sharing the land with them, we used force to overtake them. And that was not right. You know, I think there was a lot of things in history that have gone on by the United States and certain decisions that were made that were not right. But 200 years have gone by since the election of Abraham Lincoln. You know, because what you had before that was the Democratic Republican Party, which used to be just one party, and then the other political party was the Whig Party, which was a complete separate political party, mainly supported by those who supported socialism or who were loyal subjects to the crown prior to the revolution. And all this falls apart by prior to that, well, just before Abraham Lincoln wins. But there was a split with the Democratic Republican Party, and the Democratic Party became what it was, and the Republican Party kind of broke away from the Democratic Party, became its own political party. But because of the Whigs, they started out as a political third party when that break occurred. And then 1861 occurs, and Abraham, or 1860, whichever one of those years it was, I think it was 1861, and Abraham Lincoln got elected President of the United States, which the South really could care less with. But, the bottom line is that became the major party alignment ever since. And then they came up with ballot access laws and all these other requirements to try to keep the political third parties from ever coming to power or ever getting elected into Congress, the presidency, etc. So we've had this so-called two-party duopoly, which has been propped up by the Democratic and Republican parties in this country. So for 200 years, that's what we've had. But how's that working out for us? 200 years have gone by, and we so far took over the Philippines, invaded them, took them over. They became an American colony from Spain. We took them over from the Spaniards, right? And we took over a bunch of other colonies, including Hawaii, which is now surprisingly a U.S. state. And we still have a whole bunch of American territories that are in fact colonies to the American Empire, or the newly emerged American Empire that has arisen. Because that's basically what it is. This more or less includes Puerto Rico, Guam, and certain other places in the Pacific, in the Caribbean, and in the Virgin Islands, etc. So, it's kind of ambiguous, ridiculous to say the least, that for 200 years we've had Democrats and Republicans, and on top of that, a debt increasing because we're printing money out of thin air, then borrowing money from other countries, including China, right? And it's just the whole mantra of us borrowing money from our allies, and then we can't even pay them back, and determining who our enemies are and who our allies are. It has now gotten to the point where there is no other enemy other than who the United States says our enemy is, aside from the terrorists. So if our enemy tomorrow is going to be North Korea or Russia or China, that's who it is, because that's who Trump or whoever said the enemy is. Not because, they attacked us or they invaded us or whatever, right? But because something happened in that region or in that area that the president doesn't like, so now they're our enemies. Is this really a reason to want to join the United States military? Because really, or is this really a reason to want to keep electing Democrats and Republicans who have done nothing for civil liberties and the freedoms of this country other than to trash our reputation as a country seeking peace with the world? Instead, we have all these wars. Just take a look at what's going on in Venezuela, where there was an attempted coup on the one of the dictators there, And I'll give you this much. Since the collapse of the Soviet Union, whereby all of Eastern Europe became democratic republic, or democratically elected governments of those countries, literally overnight, Russia remained a communist country until about 2008, despite Western influence in that country. But now, because they have no term limits, right? They have Vladimir Putin, who keeps getting reelected over and over and over again. And I'm pretty sure they got their problems with that as well. But there's no term limits, but they can still vote for whoever decides to seek to challenge him. But I don't know how all that's going to play out. if they're going to rig it in favor of Putin or whatnot. But whatever happens in Russia, you notice the United States never gets involved in that, right? Because Russia, if Russia ever found out that we rigged one of their elections, they would use that as a means to invade us militarily, or maybe on a smaller level to attack us electronically, via cyber attacks or whatnot. In any given case, that's not good for our republic, our democracy, our civil liberties, our rights. If another country decides to invade us militarily or attack us now through cyber, by use of cyber security or cyber threats, that you see that go on. But this foreign policy that we have draws up more enemies, if anything, and our complete complacency towards ignoring the U.S. Constitution and having people like former President Barack Obama, Clinton, Bush, and now Trump. I gotta say, until we get the Libertarian Party elected for president, for Congress, what have you, I think things are going to go in a really bad direction. And I don't personally think the Libertarian Party is ever going to get elected until the economy collapses and people realize, oops, we've been lied to by these two major parties the whole time. I mean, let's think about it. And this goes back to why Iraq has become a failed state, because of our foreign intervention there when we went overthrew Saddam Hussein in around 2003. 2000 and later on that same year, or early 2000, towards the mid year of 2004, when they held their elections, it was all prompted by the United States, but I don't think people saw that at the time. But now they're starting to realize, hey, something's not right with this government that we have, because I think they're starting to see that it was propped up to begin with, to protect, so that we can take their oil and practically steal it from them without their consent. If instead of doing a trade deal with Saddam, we overthrow him and elect a government that says, okay, you can take our oil and you can trade with us or what have you. And I think that was more the motive. But now things are just spiraling out of control. And like I think whatever goes on in that country and others, right? I think this is the result of the United States playing God, saying, okay, let us come in as the savior when there's really no need to. And this is probably why this is for the same reason why you have most draconian laws that are starting to come up in this country and other countries around the world. It's because I think it has more to do with the military-industrial complex than it does and the United States federal government of Congress or the president or what have you. But you got to remember something, though. The president we have right now is no friend of minding our own business in terms of not being military involved. So I think with President Trump, what you're going to see is more intervention, not only in Iraq, but maybe in Venezuela. I mean, this holds especially true with trade restrictions that we've placed on Cuba, including the refusal to lift their embargo and instead put crippling sanctions on them, which has in no way, shape, matter, or form affected their so-called dictator. It has instead hurt the people, the poor people in that country seeking freedom and civil liberties, what have you. So, again, these are all things to think about going forward. Are these type of policies what we want? I mean, I can think all I want until I'm blue in the face. I'm hoping maybe we can at least increase our vote totals and just maybe turn things around so that we don't have an economic collapse. If we're able to get libertarians elected, if we're able to elect a libertarian president, if we're able to get libertarians elected to Congress, etc. And then I think we're making more strides at the local level than we are at the federal level. But this is not to say that, people aren't going to sit there and vote for the Democratic and Republican parties, especially considering the lies that come from the media and all this stuff that a lot of people, the majority of people in this country, from what I've seen so far, choose to go along with. And I don't think they're going to go along with this concept that, we propped it up to a republic in Iraq. But I think that's exactly what's going on, is the people there are saying, actually, yes, you have. So this is all food for thought. Something to think about. I'm Michael J. Long, and thank you for joining me. I appreciate it.